Welcome back, YouTube. I'm Reedster with Far Gaming, and in this Unity scripting tutorial, we'll be looking at the three different types of control flow and how they can improve the performance of your scripts. Let's get started. If you don't know what control flow is, it's simply just the order that lines of code in your script execute. So, do the lines of code go straight down? Does it kind of bounce around? It's the flow of your script. And when you're writing your scripts, proper control flow can have major impacts on your game's performance. If you have a bunch of lines of code that are running every single frame of your game, and they're not necessarily needed to run that often, then your game is going to require way more resources to run than what is actually necessary if you had proper control flow. If done the right way, only the code that is absolutely necessary to be running should be the code that's running every single frame or however often it's running. Getting into the types of control flow, first we have sequential. This is the most basic form of control flow where statements are executed in the order they appear in the script. So it starts at the top and works its way down one line at a time. If you aren't familiar with this update function in Unity, it runs once per frame, meaning if I'm just using sequential control flow, all of this code right here is running once per frame. The player score is going up by 1 point, the light color is constantly being updated to white, and the range of the light is increasing. It's pretty straightforward and boring. I think this code would be a lot nicer by making these lines of code only run if something happens to trigger them first, which will bring us to our next type, conditional control flow. This type of control is where we have conditions that determine which lines of code get executed and which ones don't. In this example, I have an if statement, an else if statement, and an else statement. The if and the else if statements have conditions that say if the player score is greater than 70, run this code. But if that doesn't return true, if it returns false, it's not going to run that line of code and it's instead going to go down to else if, check if this is true, which in this case it is because our player score is 50, that's greater than 40, it's going to run the code inside there. So looking at the flow of our script now, we come in and check the value of our variables, and then once per frame, it's going to check if the player score is greater than 70. In this case, it's not, so it's going to skip this line of code. It's going to go around it, go down to else if, check this, that returns true. It's going to run what's inside of it, and it's going to completely skip over this else statement at the bottom. So conditional control flow is great for optimizing your scripts and allowing you to only run code when you actually need to run that code. I don't need every single line in this script running every single frame of my game. So sticking it inside if and else if statements, I'm able to cut down on how much is having to happen every single frame, overall boosting the performance of my game. Lastly, we have iterative or loop control flow. This enables code to repeat a certain number of times or until a particular condition is met. So whenever my script first starts, I have a for loop that is going to run 25 times and spawn in 25 enemies. The way it works is I have an integer called I that is equal to 0, and for every single time this runs and I is less than the number of enemies, which is currently set to 25, it's going to run the loop and whatever code is inside of it. And I'm also going to increment I, which this adds 1 to the value of I so that eventually it will stop running once it reaches 25. And then inside, I'm going to have my code that will spawn a single enemy. Now, alternatively, I could just write this code 25 different times so that it will spawn 25 different enemies, but that's harder for you to keep track of. And on subsequent levels, whenever I maybe want to increase the number of enemies in a level, I could reuse this script and I can just go in and change this 25 to 50. And now this loop is going to run 50 times and spawn in 50 enemies. So I have more control over it, and it keeps my script looking a lot cleaner and a lot less lines in my script. So again, this is loop control flow, where it just loops through the same code over and over until a certain condition is met, which in this case, whenever I is equal to or greater than number of enemies, this loop will stop running. Well, that's it for this introduction to control flow. If you learned something, please consider subscribing so you can catch all my future content, and drop a like if you're feeling generous. Otherwise, I'll catch you on the next one.